In this video, there's one last thing that I want to touch upon around our app component. Let's go down to the render function. Remember, inside of here, we've got those two if statements to check for the case in which we have an error message and not a latitude, or an error message and a latitude, and our spinner. Now, at present, there's something inside of here that's kind of deceptively hidden, but it's something that would make changing this app component in the future really, really challenging. Let's say that for some crazy reason, we get a new requirement on this project. And the new requirement is that no matter what we're showing, be it the error message, be it the season display, or the spinner, no matter what, we have to show a big red border around the edge of the page. I know that sounds crazy, but let's just imagine it for a second. So essentially, I would want to have something like this, a border 10 pixels, something like that. No matter what, I always want to see a border going around the edge. Now, in order to do so, we would essentially have to find these three different return cases inside of our render function and surround or wrap each of these cases with maybe some div that has a class name that would apply the actual border. So let's take a look at what that would look like very quickly. Now, don't type out the code that I'm about to write. I'm just going to type this out very quickly and then undo these changes. I just want to show you very quickly. So here's what we would have to write to get that border in here. We'd have to put a div up there. We would have to put that same div on the next return statement down here and wrap the season display. And we would have to put the same div around the spinner, like so. That's more or less what we would have to do. Now, without a doubt, we could probably figure out some way to get a CSS class on some parent element to the app component, but I think you kind of get the idea here. If we want to make sure that no matter what case we fall into, be it the error message, the season display, or the spinner, was always wrapped with some particular element, we would have to duplicate that element in all three locations. And as you might guess, no, that's not something we're going to really ever be doing. So we're going to figure out a way to work around this. I'm going to first begin by undoing those little divs that I just stuck in here as a quick example. And there we go. All right. So really, the root of our problems here is the fact that we have all of this kind of conditional logic inside of our render function. So in order to fix this problem, I'm going to create a helper function. It's going to be a helper function that's going to contain all of the code that is currently inside the render method. Let's make this helper function, and then you'll very quickly see where we are going with this. So I'm going to make a helper function inside this body called about, I don't know, render body. How about render content? That's a good reasonable name. And then inside of here, I'm just going to take the three different cases that we fell into from the render method, are going to cut them, and then put them up into the render content instead. Then inside of my render method, I'm going to remove the comment above it. And inside there, I'm going to return some div, like let's say a div that gets a border red, like so. And then inside that div, I can call this dot render content like so. So we still have all the same logic we had before, but now it's all been centralized in one location so that no matter what case we fall into here, be it the showing the error message, showing the season display, or showing the spinner, we are always going to surround the result with a div that has a class name of border red. So in general, anytime that we make a component, we always try as much as possible to not have multiple return statements inside of a render method for exactly this reason. We might very easily fall into a condition where no matter what, we always want to return what gets wrapped from or what gets returned from a component with some common element like so. If we have multiple return statements inside of a render method, doing that becomes very challenging. If we ever have to have conditional logic, as you see right here, we're always going to instead put it into a helper method. So now, when the render method gets called, we're going to show the div, we're going to call render content, we figure out what case we are in, and then we return the appropriate component. So let's save this, and we're going to just make sure that everything still works. Now remember that there is no class name of border red here. No border is going to actually show up. This was just an example to help you understand that, yeah, sometimes we want to wrap everything that comes out of component with some common element like so. Okay, so I'm going to flip back over. Now if I refresh the page, yep, everything still works as expected. I can hit allow, and I still see my content up here. Okay, so that's pretty much it. That is basically our entire app. Now, we've gone through a tremendous number of topics inside of this application. We spoke about classes, state, we saw lifecycle methods, we saw default props over here, we saw these kind of config objects. We did a lot here. So let's take a quick pause. When we come back in the next section, we're going to do a quick wrap up on some of the big topics that we went through, and then we'll go through a couple of exercises. So quick pause, and I'll see you in just a minute.